Welcome to the British Chamber of Commerce Singapore's podcast channel. We're excited to bring you Season 3 of new episodes featuring in-depth content across Singapore, ASEAN and the United Kingdom. We've had some extraordinary guests on our channel, including Formula One's Claire Williams.
I'm a firm believer that any great team, any successful team has a great culture flowing through it. You aren't successful if you don't. So we put a lot of work into this.
Renowned mountaineer Kenton Cool.
There, 2019, there with a client, a big storm came in and literally destroyed Camp 2. And I've got some video footage of Sherpas like trying to hold on to the tent fabric as it blows away. And
the Royal Navy's Commodore Steve Morehouse, commander of the UK Carrier Strike Group.
The squadron of F-35 aircraft we have on board is a Royal Air Force squadron, and the personnel there are drawn from both the Navy and the Air Force. So what better way of showing just the efficiency and the joined-up nature that we now have.
And distinguished Sky News anchor Jeremy Thompson.
We had two little vans with satellite links, and we leapfrogged up the road to Pristina, the capital, throughout that first day with non-stop coverage from basically inside a war zone.
We also sit down with the likes of TikTok, Twitch and Twitter and continue to bring you conversations around business and trade, leadership and people, sustainability, sports and arts and much, much more. Thank you, as always, for your support and we hope you enjoy this podcast. Hello and welcome to the British Chamber of Commerce Singapore's podcast channel and another episode of In Conversation. My name is David Kelly and I'm the Executive Director here at the Chamber. And this is the series where I sit down with some truly interesting and inspiring people to find out a bit more about them and their organisations and what they do. This Week in Singapore has an education theme to it, and this episode coincides with Going Global Asia Pacific, the first regional edition of the British Council's flagship Going Global conference. It's aimed at leaders in education with a focus on the Asia Pacific region, and the conference is taking place in Singapore this week. The theme, International Education in the UK and Asia Pacific, how to pursue equity in an inequitable world. My guest today is Professor Sir Steve Smith. Sir Steve Smith was appointed as the UK International Education Champion in June 2019, a new government role aimed at boosting global education partnerships all over the world. He was also appointed as the Prime Minister's Special Representative for Education to Saudi Arabia in October 2019. And of the 5 Tier 1 countries for Sir Steve to help enhance UK international education partnerships, there are 2 here in Southeast Asia. Those are Indonesia and Vietnam. And he is has been looking forward to this trip to the dynamic region. It's great to have Sir Steve here as well, or post all of our COVID restrictions. Sir Steve has held several prominent positions in the UK higher education sector. Most notably, he was President of the Universities UK, the representative body for the executive heads of the UK universities from 2009 to 2011, and was chair of the UCAS board as well from 2013 to 2019. So Steve, what an absolute pleasure to welcome you here to Singapore. And for those listening, this one's actually in person, so I can actually see you and talk to you. This is great. A very warm welcome.
Yeah, I'm very, very pleased to be here. I know Singapore very well. I've been about 70 times, but it's a great pleasure to be here and to be doing this in person, so thanks.
Oh, it's brilliant to have you back. So what have you got planned on your visit here? What brings you to Singapore and what are you looking forward to through the Going Global Asia Pacific programme?
So the immediate reason for coming is the Going Global Conference, which is 2 days of bringing together 400 or 500 leading educationalists in the world, run by the British Council. It's an excellent opportunity to listen, but also to network. For me, though, this is part of a wider ASEAN trip, really. So we've been in Vietnam, we've been in the Philippines, we go to Indonesia tomorrow. So the aim really is to link up with this part of the world in a way that hasn't been possible because of the COVID restrictions.
Can you, I've given a bit of an intro about you and your background, but what got you into education in the first place, and how have you got to sort of this point where you're representing the UK internationally?
That's a long question. I mean, the honest answer is I didn't mean to, like most people, you know. I went first in my family to go to university. That's not trivial. And I think that's probably the short answer to it. I remember when I went into the Great Hall of the People in Beijing as David Cameron's one of his guests at the state banquet, and I thanked out loud in my pathetic little way my teacher at school. Oh, wow. Because without him, without encouragement, wouldn't have been there. Education, would never have done the things I've done. So I started as an academic. I'm an international relations academic. I became president of the world body in my academic field, and then got the chance to run a university. And those chances don't come along very often. And so I did 18 years at Exeter as Vice Chancellor, and then doing some of the national jobs that you outlined. And then I was asked to do this job. I retired from Exeter in 2020 and took up this job, which is an unpaid job for government. But it sounds a really twee statement, but the truth is it's all about giving something back, because the education sector in the UK, from early years, English language skills, ed tech, special education leads, universities, it's world class, and it really is world class, and we don't have to pretend anything. It's outstanding. So my job is to go and drive up export earnings. We started out at 19.2 billion, currently 25.7 billion. The target is 35 billion by 2030, and to increase the number of international students coming into the UK. And that's what got me into it, and it's the most fantastic job, because you're really, if I can use export terminology, you're selling something that's world class, and that's rather attractive.
And you're also involved here in Singapore as well. You're involved with one of the local universities here. What's your role within to you?
So, because of the international relations background I have, for 13 years I came every summer and lectured on the NTU program, on advanced program for Asia Pacific military officers, senior military officers, APSMO. Then I got invited onto the board of the Rajaratnam Institute back in 2006. And I've been coming there. But then since 2014, I've been part of the panel that does the quality assurance framework visits, basically validates the quality of Singapore's institutions. As many people know, the incredible thing about these institutions is on one of the major international league tables, two of them, NUS and NTU, are 13th and 11th in the world. Wow. When you think about where they came, that's an incredible achievement. So it keeps me up to date with what's happening here in the university sector, and of course my UK work keeps me up to date with what's happening in the UK.
Oh, a great bridge between both countries there. One of your areas of focus, I know, is around student safety. I think this is really important. What sort of challenges are you seeing, Sir Steve, for students, and how is the educational sort of system learning and working around student safety?
It's a profoundly important point, and although we'll only cover it for a short while, I think every head of every university in the world worries about this pretty much as much as anything. There's two aspects. One is just sheer physical safety, but really that's not in most places the issue. The issue is mental health. And at Exeter, over about a 4-year period, we kept increasing the resources going into mental health provision by just under 40% a year. Wow. And we couldn't keep up. So the pressure young people are under now, older people as well, but young people, with COVID and lockdown, the pressure they're under, especially from social media, what they're meant to look like, the life they're meant to have. Isn't this cocktail wonderful? Look at my food. Don't I look great? And those pressures, I think, put a lot of students in a really difficult place, which probably for my generation didn't really exist. You might have felt you weren't having the fun that others were having, but social media is personalized, and the algorithms mean that stuff comes to you that you're interested in, and that's not good. So they're under a lot of pressure to succeed. The jobs market is opening up, and that's not so much of a problem, but learning on your own. I mean, we all thought that moving learning platforms online would mean that it was a great equalizer, but it hasn't been, because students need the personal contact. They need the out of classroom conversations. They need the social life. They need sport. They need all the things that universities provide to become, even more rounded individuals. And the danger is student safety in terms of isolation is an issue. And that means that in accommodation set blocks now, you'll find a lot of effort going into the pastoral side, because I just think the pressure on them to succeed in a world in which life is tough for young people. That is a big change. And certainly in 18 years as a Vice-Chancellor, student safety was always paramount, but it was acute when you actually had to deal, for example, as I did, with student suicides. And nothing in your career prepares you for that, because whatever anyone tells you, you feel in some way that you were responsible for their welfare, even if it happened off campus, even if it was personal, nothing to do with academic work. That's a really intense and deep and profound lying awake at 3 a.m. worry.
And international student intakes are education for international students is a big export for the UK. Did you see a difference between the domestic market and the international market around student wellness? Was there a difference there?
Yes, there is. In an odd way, international students tend to form groups with fellows from their own country. So what you get is, Exeter, which obviously I know best, has 6,000 international students. Part of the challenge is, do the Indonesians stay in the same place? Can they be put in separate blocks? And the answer is no. We try and integrate them. The UK students, of course, can always go home at the weekend, assuming they've all got parental homes to go to, which is a mistake we mustn't make. But I think international students had it particularly tough, especially during lockdown. To be honest, in the last few months of my vice-chancellorship, we were spending a lot of time checking up on our international students. Actually, hand on heart, the UK did brilliantly. The welfare, just getting food for them, just making sure they could order food from campus services, to be delivered. Silly thing at some level, but some contact during those first few months. So in one sense they had it more difficult. And of course we saw international student numbers fall down, but they've bounced back remarkably strongly, and therefore we're at 605,000 international students now. 3 years ago it was 440,000 coming to the UK. So in that sense there's more numbers of them there, but it was tough for them, especially in the pandemic.
It's good to hear what the industry was doing to support that, and also great to hear the number of international students has bounced back as well. I know from my days at university and certainly at school that the learning experience has certainly changed from my days. What trends are you seeing, Sir Steve, around the learning experience of students? And what are the educational establishments doing to adapt to new learners coming into the system, whether domestically or from the international marketplace?
That's a great question, because I would say the biggest single change through the pandemic, and certainly in my time in this job, has been that many more of my conversations are with ed tech companies. Right. So there's two phases. Phase one with the pandemic, what happened was everyone, having said you couldn't do it, put all their programs online very quickly. In Saudi Arabia, everything was put online within 48 hours. Wow. And in Saudi Arabia, with the Madrasati program, they record 192 lessons a day for school children. A day. I've been to the studios. 23 television channels that broadcast, and they provide laptops for kids where there's not great coverage from the internet. They've got, so in other words, everyone ran to that. And there was a view, and we heard it in Britain, I know you heard it in Singapore, where putting stuff online was seen as the answer. But it turned out to be the first step on a very long road. Because firstly, learning online is very different. It's great for lectures. It's not great for seminars. It's not great if people don't want to have their cameras on at home. So the first wave of enthusiasm was, well, is this the end of the campus university? Do we need teaching buildings? Why doesn't everyone just sit at home and do it? And then you find that what happens is that it's not enough. So where the massive investment is going on around the world, including here in Singapore, is in the phrase is learning analytics. So the question is, how do you learn compared to me? And so where companies are putting extraordinary amounts of money, and by the way, it's the equivalent of personalised medicine. And the best university in the world traditionally at this was NTU here in Singapore, who have up the Hive where they teach Renaissance engineering and medicine. And what they do is they don't do it through traditional lectures. They do it through groups in not in lecture theatres, but octagonal shaped rooms, 8 desks. Each person has to do a multiple choice question at the start of the session, having watched the lectures online, and then the algorithms work out how you're learning.
Wow.
And that's what's happening around the world. So the experience has changed. Now where we are is in a hybrid world in which the benefits of learning analytics and understanding the learning process. I mean, when you were at university, certainly when I was at university, it wasn't rote-like, but basically you learn, these are the laws of thermodynamics, and the exam question was, what are the laws of thermodynamics? Now, and you see it here, certainly in both NUS and NTU, especially in SMU, which is very good at this, you see real focus on skills, on transferable skills, soft skills. They can be called a lot of things. They're actually essential skills. They're the skills required to work in a team, the skills required to make a presentation. But to do that, you can't. It's like going to the doctor. You don't go to the doctor these days and you say, I've got this problem with my blood, and they say, well, for problems with blood, 1, do this, 2, do that, 3, do that. They take a sample and they work out what's wrong with your blood. And so that's where we are in education, and a lot of companies, and the UK's got the 4th largest EdTech system in the world, largest in Europe, and what it's doing is you'll see fantastic private sector companies, and here's the big point, no longer does anyone think that the public sector can deliver this on its own.
Wow.
The technology needed to learn in this modern world requires collaboration between the best of the public and the best of the private sector. And wherever we go in the world, governments want companies to help them, because the cost of in-person teaching is so great that it means it tends to be for the few or for the elite or whatever. So to be inclusive, you need an education system that isn't just lectures on screen, but is learning analytics to work out how different people from different cultures, different races, different ages, different genders learn how their brains function. And that's the next big frontier of the challenge. But to do that, we need the large private sector companies to work with us on those softwares. And I think that's incredibly exciting and great for inclusion.
So if I could be unfair and give you a crystal ball and say, post-pandemic, online, blended learning, formative, summative assessments, etc., learning in a way that the individual's actually getting the most out of the system. What does the future of education look like for you, Sir Steve?
That's a great question. The quick answer is the future of education is, number one, going to be international. The best educational practices and certainly the best research can no longer be carried out solely within the confines of the walled city. You've got to have international links. 60% of British research publications are now co-authored with people outside of Britain.
Wow.
And by the way, there's a correlation between the quality of the research and how international the research is.
Interesting.
Which is a very important thing for the British Chamber of Commerce sitting here in Singapore, because it's no longer enough to be just Singapore or just Britain. It's got to be international. It's first international. Secondly, it's going to be hybrid learning. I think we will see a world in which a lot of the basic stuff is online. So if you want to understand a Sanskrit poem, you can go back and check it 10 times to understand it, whereas in a face-to-face lecture, unless it's recorded, you don't have that possibility. But I do think in-person, high-quality teaching and the wider experience of being on a campus are very, very important. But the final point is, I think, and the Singapore Ministry of Education have got this point spot on, it's no longer just about lifelong learning, it's about continuous learning of the skills needed. We're teaching people now, I mean, it's a cliche, but it's true, for jobs that don't yet exist. And it's very interesting in medicine. Medicine used to be taught very rote-like, this is the spleen, this is, now the most advanced medical education involves teaching the doctor how to inquire. So you present with a problem and they then investigate to understand using the screen as well, using the web, rather than thinking the doctor knows, because what the doctor knows today he or she will have to relearn in a month's time because drugs change, the world's changed. I mean, so learning is going to be much more about how we interpret evidence, use evidence, and change the skills we need to adapt to the new requirements, rather than qualifying at 22 and that's it. And that wasn't how it was for us, for you, or certainly for me, but sometimes it was how it was presented. So I see that world evolving in that way. But just to add, in that world, what is absolutely crystal clear to me, and I say without any reservation, UK education system is absolutely world class. Everyone wants part of the UK education system. We go around the world and our problem isn't finding business, it's deciding which business to follow up with, because everyone wants to link, be that early years, as I said, special needs, university skills, edtech. So I think the UK is going to be absolutely at the forefront of the evolving technical, but also the teaching quality and pastoral quality of teaching people in the future.
I have to say, from a personal perspective, this is a sample size of one, but I think coming out of university in a very traditional system when I did, and then going into work, I've had to be reliant on lifelong learning to consistently improve myself, and I felt the education system has almost moved more quickly than I have in some parts of my career. And I was very lucky to work for a professional body that was involved in lifelong learning and supporting those on a career journey, and to help the adaptation and development of skills as a core part of someone's career. How do you see important organisations like the professional institutions, like the professional bodies in the UK, which are so vital for that lifelong learning journey? How does that fit in with your plans?
So I spend quite a lot of time working with and on behalf of the professional bodies. They are world ranking, and we must protect that at all costs. The standards, across the board, they are, if not they are certainly one of the leading world standards. And those bodies are very attractive to many of the countries that I work with. We do need to do a little bit of work on making sure that we treat it as one HMG, one UK business. One of the problems is when they compete, they often don't share. And when they don't share, we don't know how much quite they're doing. To be absolutely candid with you, it is impossible for me to deal with all the bodies one by one. It's much better if they can come together. They often need an overarching body to help them do that, and then rely on integrity between them, because the cake is so big that they're all going to get a large piece of it, but sometimes they compete at the cost of actually delivering the contract. And what some other countries do, in all honesty, is they go forward and ask for the problem, and they come up with the solution, one-stop shop, rather than saying, well, these people do this and we'll bring a delegation of 8 out to look at that. You need a body to aggregate the interests in a fair, and there probably has to be a body other than the individual organisations. They're very strong, but they're stronger when they're together. They're stronger when they're united and share data and agree that what matters is, from my perspective, and I'm sure from yours, what matters is, what does UK PLC get? And the danger is that if they squabble over, your piece of cake's bigger than mine, then maybe no one gets it. So they're vital, and we work incredibly well together. We've got a colleague, Jonathan Ledger, who works with them all the time, and he's fantastic, and they do a great job. But we need them to kind of come together to form a kind of coalition of the willing, because governments don't want to have 23 contracts. They want one, and they want us as government in the UK side to come up with the package.
Good point. And if I can help with that, I certainly will. We're obviously sat here in Singapore, and skills in the ASEAN region is an area of focus for you as well. What trends are you seeing in this part of the world, and how does that fit the UK plans to develop talent and people in ASEAN more broadly?
So, one of the shocks to me, one of the things I didn't expect, was how much time I'd spend on skills.
Right.
And I think this is a universal law. Every country sees the biggest problem as skills. I go to meet many ministers of education, and I meet ministers of investment, and they all say the same thing in slightly different tones, which is we don't have enough skilled workers. Can the UK help in training them? The problem, of course, and again, here at the British Chamber of Commerce, you'll know it, companies are very good at telling you the skills they needed last year. Asking them what skills they need in the future is really difficult for them to answer. And what you can't have is a turn-on, turn-off system. So in Britain, just to give you a classic example, the NHS has a workforce plan on nurses. And so basically they say, we need nurses. And then the universities and the colleges gear up, start training the nurses, and they say, we don't need them anymore. So they turn it off. What you need are developments of plans for skills. And the crucial point, obviously, is they've got to be very generic skills as well as the competences. To be a bricklayer, you need certain skills. To be a marine engineer, you need certain skills. But you need the crucial skill of adaptation to be able to move and reskill throughout your career. But what is mission critical here in ASEAN is a view they don't have enough. Well, they may have enough labour force. They need help in training them, but crucially they need help in certifying them, because they don't just want trained people, they want to know that they're trained. So the trend here is to look to countries like the UK to say, can you help us? One ministry actually said to us, we have 1 million marine specialists, seawomen who need training. Can you help? But that underlying problem of governments and companies being able to identify what they need is actually a bit of a barrier. So what we've got to do is to put in place, actually with the professional bodies, that's the perfect link, an adaptable form of training that actually means that what they learn today doesn't just fit them for tomorrow, but gives them the mindset to be able to reskill throughout their careers. I don't know how many jobs people are going to have throughout their careers now, but the one thing they've got to be is adaptable. My granddad's generation, you trained worked in a shoe factory, and he did the same job all his life, cutting the heel shapes. It never changed. The big change was a piece of kit came along occasionally, so we had to do a bit. But when he retired, was the same job as when he started. That's not going to happen anymore. So what that skills training needs is the ability to reskill. You can call it lifelong learning, you can call it continuous education, but the bottom line is in ASEAN a calling out for skills training that allows the countries to adapt to the changing needs of the workforce.
Also a fabulous opportunity to be more mobile in your career if you're
Correct.
in something you don't enjoy.
Totally.
So it's just setting up the future generation for something much more different, which is great. There's going to be a number of UK universities here this week and next week. It is an education time here in Singapore. We've got a number of the UK universities as part of the Chamber network as well. And those alumni networks, they can be pretty powerful, can't they? They can be the link between academia and industry. How does that sort of piece fit to your strategy?
Well, we're here to launch part of what we're launching. British Council are launching Alumni UK. The honest answer again to your question is alumni are the best ambassadors we could possibly have. I won't, but I could regale you with tales of 18 years going to alumni receptions, and you leave them. Sometimes the team leave them in tears because of the warmth. People find you and they say, is so-and-so still cleaning in the rooms at Burke's Hall or whatever?
Oh, wow, yeah.
And she looked after me when I was lonely, or is Professor so-and-so. And that's every university, it's obviously not. But what the alumni networks are very good at is, on the one hand, helping prospective students. If you're sitting there in Malaysia and you want to know what it's going to be like to go to university in Birmingham, it probably helps if someone said, well, look, I did my degree there, here's what happens, the bus is good, we'd all feel better. The other thing, increasingly, and this links again to your work, is the alumni networks become crucial for the networking careers of the alumni themselves. We at Exeter, we had alumni networks And we made the wise decision, nothing to do with me, we made the wise decision to put a bit of money into them, basically so they could organise socials and guest lectures. If a lecturer was in town, professor was in town, we did something. They were unbelievably popular. They were, because it got them, they all turned up, with their business cards and I'm in IT, I'm thinking of moving into this, those networks because, universities can't just end people's degrees and say, thank you very much, finish, bye. You've got to have lifelong networks that enable you to link with people. And for the UK, I was at an event in Manila on Friday, where the alumni were there, listening to them talk about what the UK education did to them. I was standing next to the ambassador, and we were literally both welling up, because it changed my life, and getting that kind of feel is incredible, because the truth is the quality of UK education is, there'll be mistakes made, I'm sure, but basically people love it. And the alumni are our greatest advocates. And of course, they go off and work for companies. Those companies want contacts. Off we go. Yeah. And it's really treating the alums as part of one UK HE sector that then allows us to link with businesses and group and stakeholders abroad. And that's, I think, all for the long-term good of the offer that the UK education system makes.
This has been an amazing conversation, and really thank you so much for coming in to see us on a very, very a very busy trip that you've had. We've talked about the future of education, we've talked about the value of the UK offer, we've talked about international students, safety, where that's going to go, the alumni network, the professional institutions, how you're dragging all of that together, and I think it's absolutely magnificent you're here and launching the alumni network here with the British Council. It's fabulous. There is one question we ask everybody on our podcast channel, which is, if I could offer you the British Chamber of Commerce Singapore's time machine, with all of your knowledge and your expertise that right now today, you could go back to a younger Sir Steve and you could offer yourself some advice. When would you go back in your life, and what advice would you give yourself?
I think I would probably, being completely open, not been in such a rush to get my career sorted. First in family to go to university. So I graduated, and what was the first thing I needed? A job, right? Yeah. There were only 3 jobs in my academic discipline that year, and I got one of them, fortunately. And then I started publishing like a bunny rabbit. And I went 8 years without a single break. I wish I'd travelled more then. I wish I'd seen the world. Both my wife, Jeannie, who lived here as a kid, both of us think that travel is the greatest use of your time, not because of necessarily what you see abroad, but what you re-see when you come back. I went and taught in the States when I was 28, and that shattered everything. Shattered my view of what a sandwich was, what time bars closed. I learned. But it changed my view of education. It changed my view of self. I think the danger is for many of us, we start on a conveyor belt. Certainly, if you don't come from privilege, you never know you never know how long it's going to last, and therefore, someone wants you to write a chapter of a book. Yes, someone wants you to do this. Yes, I think I'd have probably taken more summers off. Travelled a bit more and not been in such a hurry. I probably would have, not devoted my life to my career quite as much. But then, as my wife often says, you wouldn't be literally sitting where you are today, would you? And that certainly is true.
Well, I'm glad you're able to enjoy your travel now and come in to see us. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the British Chamber's podcast. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe, and why not leave us a rating and review on Spotify, Apple, Google, and the other podcast platforms. For more information, please visit our website at www.britcham.org.sg and tune in next time for a brand new episode.